How's it going, everybody? I've been using the new M1 iPad Pro for a few weeks now. Coming from using the 2018 iPad Pro with 4 gigs of RAM for all of my daily tasks like script writing, video editing, emailing, and all the rest, I've really enjoyed my time with the M1 iPad Pro with 8 gigs of RAM. I know what you're going to say. For most tasks, the 2020 or even the 2018 iPad Pro are more than enough. And Fernando Silva and I talked a bit about this in the interview that him and I did on this channel. But I've also come to realize that for some tasks, having the extra headroom in RAM and higher power chip does make a big enough difference for me to justify using this M1 iPad Pro. Here's why. Yes, I know the lowest spec 2020 iPad Pro has 6 gigs of RAM. And compared to the 4 gigs of RAM I had before, it's definitely better. But I never used the 2020 iPad Pro, and I don't plan on it, because I didn't just get the new M1 iPad for the RAM, even though that was a big factor for me. We'll get to RAM in a second, but I feel like I have a fairly good reason for me choosing the 2021 iPad Pro versus the similar and much cheaper 2020 model, even though the 6 gigs of RAM is definitely better than the 4 gigs of RAM. And the 8 gigs that I have now might be overkill, but I really think for the future of iPad is M1 or M1X or whatever Apple decides to call this new series of their in-house made silicon, whatever. But all that means is in the future, hopefully the lower end iPads will also get M1. And by the time that all these iPads have M1, Apple will be ready to give iPadOS the upgrade it deserves to take full advantage of that new M1 series chip. I really wanted to kind of future-proof myself. For how long, I don't know. But with how overpowered this iPad is, I'm hoping it'll last me a good bit of time. Meaning it'll eventually save me from having to get an iPad sooner rather than later, helping me to save some money in the long run. But really, as of right now, and this might be a hot take, but iPadOS 14 really doesn't limit me too much. And it's just honestly boring. And while iPadOS 15 might bring some nice quality of life changes, it's just what iOS 14 was on the phone, but now on the iPad and a year late. But more on my thoughts on that of iPadOS 14 versus 15 in another video, but for now, there are a few extra things on this 2021 iPad Pro that I really, really like. First of all, it is a bit thicker and it's a bit heavier, so that it can house the new mini LED screen. By the way, if you haven't guessed already, I'm talking about the 12.9 inch iPad Pro, not the 11 inch. Everything I've said so far and everything I will say is pertaining to the 12.9. I've seen a lot of people say that they can't tell a difference between this one and the previous models when it comes to weight and thickness. Girth, let's go with that. But I definitely can. I really like the difference in weight and thickness, which honestly, in my opinion, makes it feel a bit more sturdy and less breakable than the previous models, if that makes any sense. The mini LED screen is also pretty nice to have, especially for HDR content. And I do love the deeper blacks when I'm in dark mode, especially when taking notes and stuff. It's super cool. But you really don't notice the mini LED that much because it's really only limited to that HDR content that you're watching. I don't know if it's a software thing or not, but if so, hopefully Apple eventually takes that limit off the mini LED so that we can use it for video editing, but we'll see. Speaking of video editing, I love editing on this thing. So much more than on my 2018 iPad Pro. On the 2018, I honestly felt a lot of lag while using LumaFusion. And if you don't know, LumaFusion is like the base editing app on the iPad. Even though I had no extra apps open or anything else, but the video I was editing just seemed really laggy. So much so that while editing, the audio would keep going, but the video part wouldn't. And it would just really slow down my workflow. And I had to constantly shut out LumaFusion and reopen it. And it just made editing on that iPad very difficult. And I while I love editing on the iPad, that was annoying. But now on this new 2021 model, even though it sucks not being able to use the mini LED screen while editing, I can tell a massive difference on this thing versus my 2018. With 8 gigs of RAM on this new iPad, which is double what I had previously, and the M1 inside, LumaFusion has not lagged on me at all. Everything has exported from my iPhone to LumaFusion so quickly through the cloud, and it doesn't even break a sweat. And I feel much more comfortable having other apps open on my iPad while using LumaFusion, and it doesn't lag on me. Like, it still doesn't. It's crazy. That makes my video editing so much faster and easier. As a budding YouTuber, so far video editing has been the most tedious part of the job. For me, at least. And even though it's actually pretty fun, I enjoy it. I always thought it'd suck. It's actually fun. I've noticed that it takes me less time to edit than it did when I had my 2018 iPad Pro. Yes, some of that does come with experience over time, but some of it is definitely from the new iPad. The extra RAM, the overpowered chip inside this thing makes a big enough difference for me to where I would say if you do any type of professional work on your iPad, whatever that may be, video editing, photo editing, anything design related, I think that the 2021 iPad Pro is justifiable in the fact that it does save you time and it does help you get through your projects and tasks much smoother and without worry. No hiccups, and it gives you a lot of peace of mind. I say all of this based on my experience doing the same things on the 2018 iPad Pro with 4 gigs of RAM versus my usage of the 2021 iPad Pro with 8 gigs of RAM, and how much of a difference I've seen when it comes to video editing and the exporting of my files and photos and everything that I do. But if you disagree with me on any of this for any reason, I would love to know your reasoning and your thoughts on this topic. So please comment below what you think of this. I'm also going to be interviewing a few more YouTubers in the coming weeks about iPad Pro, Mac OS, iPad OS, and all of this stuff, and the new M1. So hit subscribe so you don't miss any of that. And make sure you hit that like button, ring that bell. I'm Jake. It's a shot on my phone.